Good evening and a warm welcome to the Rushcliffe Borough Council Governance Scrutiny Group meeting. I would like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meeting and Access to Information England Regulation 2012, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch your microphones off when you are not speaking. As well, for the benefit of others, please ensure that your mobile phone is switched off while you are in the meeting. With us, join us in this meeting, we have Mark Armstrong and from BDO, and Mark Sarich and Jenny Norman from Mazars, and we have from officers Peter Linfiel and Sarah Whitaker. So we look forward to all of your contributions. I would like now to move to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. We have Councillor Edivin to be substituted by Councillor Butler, Councillor Thomas substituted by Councillor Way, and Councillor Calvert substituted by Councillor Goland. Are there any declarations of interest? So we are moving at the third item of the agenda, which is minutes of the meeting that took place on 22nd of February 2024. There were two action points, two matters arising, points 35 and 38. A response was sent to this group on 21st of May by Tracy Cope. Have you all received the response, and are there any comments you want to raise with respect to the response? So there aren't any comments? That's fine, okay. So we are moving to the fourth item of the agenda, which is the internal audit progress Q4 report to be presented by Max Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? Sorry, I think I'm near enough to speak, yeah. So I'll be presenting the next three reports. So what I'll do is I'll give a summary of each one and then pause after each report to take any questions. So the first one on the agenda is the progress report. So this summarises our internal audit progress over the last 3 months since the last governance scrutiny group. So what you can see on page 17 of your packs is our executive summary, which shows the three 23-24 reviews we've completed in the last quarter. So fleet management, Rushcliffe Oaks crematorium, income, and the e-financial system controls. So that now concludes our 23-24 plan. And I'll move on to our annual report as our second paper. We've also made a start on the work for the 24-25 internal audit plan. So the two reviews which the committee approved at the last meeting that we've commenced our field work on are the workforce and succession planning reviews and the cybersecurity reviews, and they're due to come to the next committee, which will be in September. We've also got our fraud report, which we undertake for the council each year, which again is the third paper, so I'll come on to that in more detail a little bit later. So what we have from page 19 of your packs is the summary of the three reviews that we have completed for 23-24. So the first one is for fleet management, where we've provided moderate assurance on the control design and substantial assurance on the control effectiveness. So this review sort of looked at two different elements, actually. One was around the operational effectiveness of the fleet management service, including compliance with statutory checks on drivers and vehicles, but also the climate change element, which obviously is quite a significant part of it, vehicle emissions, and the council's objective to move by 2030 to a net zero approach on its fleet. So to pick up on the two findings that were raised, the first one, which is a medium finding, is around the operational side, where our testing of agency drivers found that periodic checks, unlike for council employed drivers, for agency drivers, periodic checks weren't conducted through an electronic system to check that they hadn't sort of accrued points on their license or been expelled from driving or those sorts of things. This risk is mitigated, which I think the management response shows by the fact that actually this does only relate to agency drivers that are more long term. So every time a new agency driver is used, they will do those sorts of checks. But for the long term drivers, these checks may not be done periodically as employed staff would be. And then the second finding, which to a degree isn't so much a finding actually, because it reflects the positive work the council have done so far around its fleet. But it's to say actually there's still some work to do to get to that 2030 target, albeit there's still 6 years until that date elapses. So actually it's probably important to recognise here the good work that has been done so far around very recently in the last month and a half, converting 21 vehicles to HVO fuels, including the big refuse vehicles, which contribute to quite a large proportion of those emissions. But also the external commissioning of work from an organisation called Senex to look at how the council can look to electrify its fleet going forward. And funding has been put into the Midlands Net Zero group to get some support for that. Moving on to the second review, which was on the Rushcliffe Oaks crematorium, and it was primarily an income-based review to look at the council's arrangements for charging and collecting income accurately. It also picked up on areas around the performance monitoring for the income collection and generation from the crematorium, and then debt recovery processes for that income, mainly with funeral directors. So we've provided substantial assurance on the design of controls and moderate assurance on the effectiveness with two low findings. So you can probably get the sense that it is, although it's moderate on the effectiveness, with two low findings, it's probably closer to the substantial side than the other end, which is a positive outcome. Again, just to draw your attention to the two findings briefly. So one was around the timeliness of payments obtained from some funeral directors across our sample testing, with one paid 140 days late, which obviously is quite significant. Albeit what should be recognised is that actually the level of age debts was very low. So there was only 5 age debts at January 2024, and our testing of the debtors did find that actually proactive work was undertaken to recover those amounts. Which is why we've sort of concluded it as a low risk finding. And then again, around income collection for the sort of performance reporting side of things, there was a lot of reporting around the income generation, the revenue from the crematorium. But what we've recommended is a sort of a few more KPIs or a new KPI to monitor the timeliness of payments in light of that first finding as well. And then the final review to provide a summary of is the e-financial system controls review. So this was it does what it says on the tin, a review of the e-finance system and the access controls, authorization controls around the system. So we picked a few different areas which are pretty higher risk from a system perspective, and tested those to assess whether controls were in place to prevent sort of risks around fraud and things like that. So again, we've provided substantial assurance on both control, design and effectiveness for the finance systems, with 3 low findings. So the first one around a specific privileged user account where regular checks weren't conducted of the activity on that account where POs could be requisitioned and also authorised, albeit actually from looking at the activity on the account, there is no adverse use during the year. Equally around customer supplier data and the ongoing process for quarterly or monthly checking the changes to bank details and things like that on the account to identify and detect fraud. Again, you'll see within the management comments that these are proactively done when the details are changed, but an extra control to strengthen that is what we recommended around those monthly checks. And then finally, the user access review process to ensure that actually the people who are given certain levels of authorization within the system is in line with what they should have. So that hadn't been done in the last sort of 12 months or so. But again, you can see from the management response that actually in March 2023, a larger review of user access was conducted. So that the target date of the 31st of July has been set to implement that recommendation. And then finally, just to draw to your attention on our sector update, which we provide to every quarterly committee. Just the second article, which is titled "Offlog can act as a big brother to peer challenge." This is probably specifically relevant for the council, having gone through your peer challenge quite recently. So it's just a bit of information around an article recently published with the chair of the district council's network suggesting that absolutely there could be more of a role for Offlog in ensuring some of the recommendations for all local authorities through that peer challenge could be more so enforced than maybe it is so far. So I'll pause and take any questions on the progress report.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about this user access reviews, and recommendation is we need to be doing this review on a yearly basis, but generally on the corporate world they do on a quarterly basis because 90 days is a long time. Somebody leaves or moves departments or joins, so should not be the I think period should be 3 months or 6 months in this case.
So those processes do happen. So actually, this is probably more of a in addition to those. So there are processes to show where there is a new starter or a leaver that actually this form's completed and approval was given at that point in which they're added to the system. So this sort of annual user access is almost a wash up alongside that, to give that extra level of assurance. So typically we would see annually these reviews are done across most local authorities. As opposed to sort of more regularly, but there are ongoing controls alongside that to mitigate that risk just outlined there.
Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to be, it's more of a general comment, and hopefully you can answer this. It seems to me, reading all the reports which you've talked about and the paper, and then going into the detail here, that the council is running a damn good business here, and compared to a lot of other authorities who, don't you say, are struggling. I know the things you picked up, but there's nothing. To be absolutely honest with you, that my God Almighty, that's terrible. I can't see anything terrible in it at all. That's quite the opposite. I think it's a damn good news story. I hope you can agree with me on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair analysis. And actually, what I'll come on to in the annual report in a second, which supports that, is the opinion we've given for the overall year, which I'll do a sort of prelim now in line with that question, is substantial assurance, which very few of our local authority clients get from BDO. So I think that's reflective of what you've just said.
Thank you. I thought that was nice to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment on the Rushcliffe crematorium with regards to the late invoice payments. So obviously it's not a huge risk and you've identified it as such, but it does seem to me to be quite bad that one invoice was paid 140 days late, which is nearly 5 months late. I know there are steps being taken, but is there, for example, in private business, you would put clear terms on the contracts and you would put incentives in there to make them pay on time. If not, there'll be a surcharge or maybe give a higher price to begin with and then payment on delivery of the service is this, maybe 10% lower or whatever it is. Is there anything we're doing in terms of incentives or anything we could do to increase that? Because my worry is it's a relatively new operation, and unless you set your stall out now of how you want to go on, this is something that could, get out of hand. And particularly, I assume it's quite an insular industry. The cremation business is probably just a few people you're dealing with. And my opinion is you should get it sorted now and get them paying on time. Because as I say, it does seem rather ridiculous that 140 days elapsed before payment was made.
Yeah, so in terms of the credit terms offered on the invoices is 21-day credit period. So obviously that one case was significantly beyond that. I think probably what was drawn out from our testing was that where the invoices are mostly with funeral directors, there's quite often they're relying on payments from customers. And obviously I'm not saying that's right, that they then pay the council late, but there's often that chain where if they're not getting their payments, then there's a degree of it might not work upwards. In terms of the incentives or the surcharges you refer to, I probably would defer to the council management on that side in terms of it's a council decision to make in terms of it's a relatively new operation. How far do you want to manage it with those funeral directors in terms of applying those surcharges? So if it's okay, I may sort of defer to Pete and Sarah in terms of your views on that.
I think from the perspective of the crematorium, this particular one, I think from your testing will show that that was like an isolated case. And in general, we are happy with the controls that we've got. It goes through the council's debtors debt control policy, as do all of the debts. So the recovery process will be the same for those, which is generally enough to encourage payment within the terms. As you said, it is a new business, and we wouldn't want to encourage sort of asking for payment up front at this stage because it might damage the relationship between us and the funeral directors. So it's just sort of assessing on a case-by-case basis and seeing what approach we want to take with each individual director.
Apologies, if I could just add to that as well, I should have said before, but actually that 140-day payment was the outlier, as Sarah said. So there were a few other non-compliant cases, but we drew that one out specifically because it was longer in terms of overdue, but the others were much less.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Yes, I was also going to pick up on the crematorium point, and I think the question's been partially answered. Could it be that slip up was the fact that it is still comparatively new? I don't know, mistakes happen, busy time and all the rest of it. So hopefully I hate that expression, but a lesson has been learnt on this one, and I do fully see how we're going to pick up on that. But just out of query really, is obviously the crematorium is part of Rushcliffe, and when it comes to the actual invoices, the issuing of invoicing and managing of them, is that done at the crematorium by the crematorium team, or is it done as part of the central sort of Rushcliffe general billing side of things? Because it's quite a new thing for this council to have perhaps an external service that is receiving payments for. So really, just are we sure on how? Well, I'm just curious really how the payments are managed. Okay, thank you.
So the crematorium do their own invoices, and I think again your testing has shown that the invoices that have been raised are correct and in line with the services that have been received. So we've got no concerns there, and like I say, it is a new service, so it will be monitored. We have reconciliations in place that are done on a monthly basis between the systems. And as I've said previously, if it gets to a past due date, it then becomes part of the council's debt recovery from the team that we've got centrally.
Are there any?
Can I just ask, can you remind me, when did it actually open, the crematorium?
I think it was April or end of March last year.
3rd of April. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Any other questions? Can I use my vote to ask a question as well? It may be about semantics, and just to clarify, it's my first time on that group, so maybe I'm familiarized with the language nomenclature being used. It's with respect to the fleet management, the first report, where it says about the decarbonization, the net zero target by 2030, and the contribution of the fleet management on that you mentioned about 25%, and the commission of some service, I think, for the multi-year refreshment plans to decarbonize, to have sustainable, to Senex. You mentioned at the report that the review by Senex identified that the council have made limited progress so far to reduce emissions from its fleet. And I know you mentioned after that there is a multi-year refreshment plan in place, and there is a partnership agreement as well, procurement of sustainable vehicles. But after that, it says immediately that leads us to the conclusion that the control effectiveness is substantial. Can you please elaborate a bit about? Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I guess in terms of the wider area, so the target is set for 2030, and I think it's picked out within the council's own climate change, carbon reduction action plan, that 25% of that is the fleet. So clearly it's a significant contributor to that. in terms of the question around the substantial effectiveness opinion, but the previous statement by Senex, it's probably important to recognise that the Senex report was at a point in time. So actually, which I think finding one shows and good practice shows is there's been work done since that point. It's also probably important to recognise this is a challenging area for all local authorities. They're quite or reasonably tight deadlines, looking sort of 6 years into the future. And actually, what we've seen from the council is further beyond what we've seen from other local authorities in terms of that aim to electrify and decarbonise the fleet. There's probably other sort of management-related challenges in terms of, particularly for refuse vehicles, how the council decarbonises and moves its refuse vehicles over to electric in the long term, because obviously the infrastructure needs to be there. The depots aren't all fully owned by the council and things like that. So there's other challenges there, but what we've seen from the governance, the work done so far, the commissioning of the report by Senex, and then recently the move to the HVO fuels for some of its vehicles, including the high emitters, that's what's led us to that effectiveness opinion around substantial. And there is a degree of what the council are doing versus what we're seeing more widely in the sector.
Thank you, Chair. Like the Chair, I'm new to this committee, so I'm wondering if I can ask something about the sector update thing, the levelling up projects. It's astonishing, apparently, that a lot of this money hasn't been spent, and I'm interested to know where we are with spending our proportion of the levelling up fund.
It's really out of scope. The purpose of that thing is really it's nothing to do with this report really. So I could talk to you outside of the meeting, but that's.
Thank you, Chair. Will the refuge lorries be run on vegetable oils or will they be electric? Because electric, they don't go as far with the weight of the rubbish.
So as of last month, they've been transitioned to the hydro treated vegetable oil, which is what they're currently running on. My understanding is that the long-term aim is to electrify them, but there are, say, challenges that you just mentioned in terms of how far they can go. Rushcliffe's quite a large borough and district, and also in terms of the actual size of the vehicle that would be required. My understanding is they're not actually currently available in as an electric vehicle yet, which was highlighted in the Senex report as well. So there are challenges which probably the vehicle sector would need to address before the council can obviously invest in those vehicles. But at the moment, it's the HVO fuels to not bring it down to net zero, but to reduce the emissions compared to obviously running on white diesels.
Are there any other questions or contributions? So it is recommended that the Governance Scrutiny Group consider the Quorum for Progress Report for 2023-24 prepared by the Council's internal auditor. So we've done that. So I think we can move to the item 5 of the agenda, which is Internal Audit Annual Report 2023-24, presented by Max Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. So starting from page 40 or 39 in your packs is our annual report. So this is as internal audit providers, this is our annual opinion of the council's internal controls, governance and risk management, based on the work that we've done over the last 12 months. So as I mentioned slightly earlier, so we have provided substantial assurance, which is now the second year running. We've provided that opinion. Which reflects the positive outcomes that you've seen from the reports that we've presented in this committee and previous committees, but then also from page 43 in your packs. So primarily, our opinion is driven by the opinions in our reports and the work we've done over the year, which, as I say, was positive, and there was quite a lot of substantial opinions in individual reports. We do also sort of take other outside assurance as well. So, for example, the positive outcome, I think broadly in the peer challenge review that was reported recently in April. Also the culture and the cooperation with the management team, which has been positive over the last 12 months as well, which feeds into that wider sense of governance and internal controls within the organisation. So as I say, from page 43 for the next sort of 4 or 5 pages or so, that is the summary of each of our reviews throughout the year. I won't go into that in too much detail because we've presented those reports over the last 12 months or so, but they provide the conclusions ultimately from our work. As you see, every report's got a substantial opinion on both the control design and effectiveness, or on one of the two. Moving on to the graphs that are in your packs from page 50. So these sort of show the journey over the last few years in terms of the number of recommendations we made overall, and how the opinions split between the design and control effectiveness. And again, the trajectory is positive. So we've seen a reduction in the number of median findings, and the number of recommendations, and the number of recommendations overall, but also a generally sort of stable position on the number of control design opinions, and a slight improvement on the number of control effectiveness opinions. So that hopefully gives you the sense of sort of why we've come to our conclusion of substantial assurance. And then the following pages sort of outline some of the key themes and added value from our work throughout the year. So in terms of the reviews that we did undertake as part of the 23-24 plan, there were themes around looking at the finance systems and areas such as that in terms of the financial systems review, but also the main financial systems. A few of the reviews involved income collection, so that was a focus for this year, to look at the council's arrangements for collecting income that is charged. But we also picked up on other areas such as climate change in the fleet management review we mentioned today, and that will continue going forward as well. So we've got reviews in the plan for 24-25 that build upon that, and look at areas such as environment, which I know is becoming more of a key area for local authorities. So I'll pause at that point on the annual report, and again invite any questions.
Just a query, really. I mean, I mean, without being sounding overly complacent, it does make pretty good reading, I think, doesn't it? And if we're honest with ourselves on here, but what am I thinking? I don't know. No, I do know what I'm thinking. It's a procedure thing as to what happens next. So we've got this annual report now, which generally is pretty good. So what happens after this then? I mean, is this tonight when we're as a committee we're assuming we're going to accept the recommendations? Is that it then? And then we then sort of commence almost immediately on an annual report for this coming year. I mean, it's just a procedure thing more than anything I'm curious about, really. If that makes sense. Sorry, I was a bit garbled there because it's but anyway.
So I mean, from our role as internal audit, so that what you've described is the process. In terms of each year we do our annual report, and then obviously we continue our work for 24-25. Our approach to ensure we are looking at the right areas is for our internal audit planning, which we took to last committee, so we completed it over November and January at that period, is to focus on a risk-based plan. So we look at the risk register, we spoke to all members of the executive management team, we looked at other documents relating to the sector more broadly. So we work across over 50 local authorities nationally, so using our knowledge from that to develop the plan. And then also other issues that are quite sort of prevalent within the sector, which we'll see in the media. So that's our process for then developing the following year's plan, which has already been done. So whilst obviously we're presenting our annual opinion for 23-24 here, the work for 24-25 has already started, and it is focusing on what could be the higher risks for not just this council, but local authorities more generally, yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment because it's quite easy to take these sort of reports for granted, and I don't think that there's a lot of work by officers and councillors actually to get into what is a positive position. That said, we're not complacent, and we have to keep working hard, working with external audit as well, and we're talking about some of their work later. But I think it's important to recognise the hard work of the officers, of management, of councillors, to get to this what is a positive position. In fact, I think it's the last 3 years we've had a substantial assurance. It's like being a football team. When you're at the top, it's harder to stay there. As a Man United supporter, that's what we've found. So anyway.
Any other question, contribution? Okay, so it is recommended that the Governance Scrutiny Group notes internal audit's annual report in relation to 2023-24. We've done that, so we can now proceed to item 6 of the agenda, which is Annual Fraud Report 2023-24, presented again by Max Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. So this is my final report, which is the last you got to hear from me today. Which is the annual fraud report. So this is a report that we do for the council every year at the start of the year and present to the first committee of the financial year. So the aim of this report is to summarise the fraud prevention activities and report any known instances of fraud at the council during the year. Alongside this, as following a recommendation that was made in last year's fraud report, the council have prepared a fraud risk assessment, which will be brought to the next committee, which sits alongside this, where essentially the council has developed the fraud risk assessment, and we've sort of reviewed some of the assertions, the process, and things like that around it. So that will be brought to the next committee in September. In terms of the sort of general area around fraud across the public sector, I think it's probably quite well reported. There's been a general increase over the last few years around detected frauds and errors. So the Public Sector Fraud Authority reported last March there had been a 52% increase in the level of detected fraud and error, and part of that was driven by COVID-related fraud. In terms of from our report, so from page 66 in your packs and section 3, this summarises the work we've done as part of this annual fraud report. So as part of our internal audit work, we're not responsible for looking at areas of fraud, but we do pick up on any areas of fraud or weakness in controls that could then cause a fraud. And we've not identified any instances for our internal audit report, our internal audit work. Additionally, there's only been one identified fraud incident by the management team, as reported in here, relating to a taxi driver not operating with a Rushcliffe Borough Council taxi licence. Other work the council have done with partners in the Nottinghamshire Fraud Partnership has commenced from 2023, led by the Office for the Police Constabulary, and again sort of shows that commitment towards sort of managing fraud across the wider sector. So moving on to page 68 in your packs and section 5. So I do have to apologise for an error in the data actually on the table in section 5.2. So the 23-24 figures show a big decrease, but that data actually relates to the council tax reduction scheme. So the data for the single person discount is actually in 5.3 below, where you'll see that the council have actually done, from November, done some work with external contractors to review higher risk cases, which has resulted in a significant increase in additional council tax revenue through the SPD of 175,000 through that exercise. And then just moving on to the sections that follow that, so around the work the council has been doing, which obviously trigger a higher risk around fraud. So grants and the grants the council have administered. We've done some work from an internal audit perspective around the grant management controls, which did look at potential sort of fraud risks that could arise from giving those grants out. And substantial assurance was provided in that review, which identified good sort of detective fraud controls. And then finally, just a few of the sort of, I guess, recommendations you could say from this report, which have been raised towards the end. So areas where the council could improve. So specific fraud awareness training for staff could commence, and existing forums such as the employee engagement sessions could be used to, I guess, generate more awareness and interest amongst staff in fraud. And then also some additional testing to get an understanding of what is the staff's fraud awareness for existing mechanisms such as the employee survey or scenario testing on things like that. So that summarises the annual fraud report. Again, apologies for the incorrect data in 5.2, but 5.3 does summarise the accurate data for 23-24. And I'll pause there to invite any questions.
Thank you. I saw the comments about whistleblowing reporting. I just out of interest, really, and given what you said about staff training on fraud, I just wondered if it's possible to know what it says on the internet about whistleblowing and what the whistleblowing procedure is at Rushcliffe. Thank you. Sorry.
I think the whistleblowing policy is probably a bit too large to get into over discussion, but I can share copies of the policy. Excuse me, sorry, what was your other question?
Well, it was the same question. I guess. Oh, sorry. I guess that's the problem. I suppose and say actually, if it's very long, I wonder. You know, we deal with in my job sort of similar situations, and the systems have to be really simple and straightforward to get people to do it and use it, obviously. And so I'd just be interested to know how simple and straightforward it is so people to know where to go and what to do.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying it's very long. It's just it's too long for us to articulate it in a sentence.
Any other questions, contribution? I'll ask a question then if nobody else wants to ask.
I do have a simple question. I mean, if you wanted to whistleblow, where would you go tomorrow?
The guidance is that we go to our line manager immediately, but then after that you can go to any senior manager in the council. So that's made clear, and there are awareness that goes out within the staff magazines within the council on a regular basis, as well as it being on the internet.
So I was just going to, Councillor Butler.
I've just noticed something in paragraph, round about paragraph 5.3, where we're referring to council tax discounts and for 18-year-olds and mismatches. Oh dear, where are we? I've lost it. Oh yes. Oh, is there a danger of losing out more so nowadays? Because I'm assuming, I guess that more and more people are not registering on the electoral roll. And so does that impact on sort of managing the match of council tax collection? Is there some risk of missing out on people who are residents here, but for whatever reason they've chosen not to be on the electoral roll, or is that too deep a question for an audit as such?
I think there are other ways of matching people. I'm not an expert on that area, but there are other ways other than the electoral register of matching people to property, which is why they do this data matching and find these cases.
Are there any other questions? I'll take myself, and it's just on the sentence you say the council does not have a dedicated fraud prevention resource. Is that a legacy thing? Is that a cost-efficient thing? Or is that a data-driven thing that because there isn't fraud reporting, or is that why it's not a need, or it's just a position that's customary share and it's a collective responsibility of all the officers? Thank you.
So I will possibly pass over to Pete for the sort of bulk of that question. I mean, it's probably worth saying to start with, which I think is reflected in the early stage of the report, is that it does obviously take fraud seriously, and the fraud is more the responsibility of the service managers through sort of everyday work and work with staff. In terms of the second or first part of the question, if it's okay, Pete, I'll pass over to you for that part.
It's probably all of the above, as you sort of described, a mixture of all of those. And historically, they used to have a fraud manager, but when some of the housing benefits got transferred to DWP, so did the part of that person's post, because a lot of the risk really was linked to benefits. So that post went to the post went to the DWP, and that was the same for a lot of councils. And to be frank, for us, it comes down to like a lot of posts. It comes down to I suppose the appraisal of risk. You know, if we thought the risk was significant enough, then we'd perhaps be looking at a post. Obviously, we don't see it as significant enough, and based on recent history, that remains the same. Clearly, if things change, then perhaps we'll be looking at it slightly differently. So, it's like any job really. You have to look at it based on an individual basis.
Are there any other questions? So it is recommended that we consider the annual fraud report. We have done that. So that's the end of BDO's Max Armstrong's reports for tonight. Thank you very much. You're welcome, of course, to stay for the rest of the meeting. Or listen.
So I just want to thank Max as well, because Charlotte's going to be coming back, I think. So Max was here on a sort of covering some maternity cover, I guess. But Matt's done sterling work, and thank you for your work on behalf of the council and also the committee.
So we are moving at the item 7 of the agenda, external audit annual plan 2023-24, presented by Mark Serge.
Thank you, and good evening. I appreciate there's a few new members, so just to introduce myself formally, I'm Mark Surridge. I'm the audit partner at Mazars, responsible for ultimately signing the opinion on your financial statements and arrangements. The external audit plan that you have in front of you sets out the direction of travel in which we anticipate performing our work. Broadly, I would take you to, I think it's page 80 of your pack, which sets out our responsibilities as your external auditor, which, if you're familiar with external audit, is actually broader in the local government context than what you might experience elsewhere. So we have, as set out here, 5 particular areas. We're responsible for issuing an opinion on the financial statements. That's fairly core and common. We don't have responsibility for the prevention or detection of fraud, but should we identify any matter that would be material fraud, we would be required to bring it to your attention. On the other side, internal control, again, we are not responsible for looking at internal controls or managing internal controls, but through the course of our work, if we identified a significant weakness, we would bring it to your attention. We are responsible for probably the worst named aspect of our work, which is value for money. We do not provide an opinion on whether the council provides value for money or not, but we do provide a commentary on the underpinning arrangements for financial sustainability, decision making and performance management. And then the last aspect of our responsibilities fall under unique aspects of local government legislation, which allows elected representatives to come and ask or object to items of account, and as a consequence, consider whether we should enact specific reporting powers. In terms of the main bulk of our work, page 82 sets out the team, which has got me in it, but also Jenny is here today. Jenny's the assistant manager on the job, and whilst I end up signing it, Jenny does all the work. But Jenny's going to take you through the aspects of our financial statement audit.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so just a few words from me on the more operational side of the audit plan. So go to page 83, sorry, in your audit pack. Sorry, from audit. So page 83 in your packs, about where we talk about the external audit scope, approach and timeline, which we have in more detail on page 86. So we have actually substantially completed the planning and risk assessment and interim phases of the audit. We came to the offices at Rushcliffe Borough Council in March and April. I would like to thank the finance team, who were very helpful and allowed us to complete our risk assessment. We even got a lot of early testing done, which will put us in a good position for the fieldwork stage of the audit, which is due to begin at the end of June. We then will hope to finish the work, or be able to finish the work by August, but we will not be able to give the audit opinion until September, purely because we need to wait for assurance of the pension fund auditor, which won't be available until then. But we're in a very good position. And another couple of words then on the main focus in terms of risk on the audit. So we have three main risks that we most are very common on all district councils. The first one, management override of controls, is in fact a mandated risk on all audits of whatever entity, mandated by the ISAs. In local government, we also then focus on the valuation of the LGPS net defined benefit pension, and also the valuation of the council's land and buildings portfolio. So these areas are risky because of how big they are and how material they are to the council's balance sheet, but also they involve a high amount of estimation uncertainty and judgment, which we have to challenge in our role. So I'll just pass back to Mark to discuss the rest of the report.
Sure. So the rest of the report, seconded by Chair, scope around work on money. Yes, thank you. I knew I'd do that. So value for money arrangements, which is set out in section 5. So our responsibilities as your external auditor is to follow what's called the Code of Audit Practice, which defines what appropriate arrangements are for financial sustainability. So that will be looking at the council's financial plans and planning process for 24-25, as well as the year ended March 2024. We will look at governance, and that's informed decision making. So that includes aspects of risk management, for example. It also includes the constitution and how this committee functions. And the last area that we will look at is a bit of a mouthful called improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And that is essentially looking at how performance management works, as well as how you work with what we would define as strategic or key partnerships, and ensuring there are appropriate arrangements in place for that and any procurement that you undergo. At this point in time, it's a live process. So our planning and risk assessment stays live until the date at which we sign our report. At this point, we have identified no areas to require a deeper dive. We would call that a risk of significant weakness, but we have not identified any area that gives us such concern to date. That's my auditor caveat that says I can always come back and change my mind. But essentially, there is nothing that says we need to focus even deeper at this point in time. Our fees are set out in section 6, which represent I think a sizable increase from the previous year. We do not set the audit fee. That is set by an independent body. And then section 7 is probably the last section I'll really talk about. Section 7 talks about our independence. We're independently appointed. We perform specific checks to maintain our independence and therefore our objectivity and ability to deliver the audit free from any conflict of interest or any fettering of our opinion. Those checks have been run and I can confirm there were no matters to report. The remainder of the report just talks a little bit in terms of the granularity of the audit, most of which will come back to you when we complete our work. So I'd be happy to pick up any questions at this point.
Councillor Bates.
Yeah, excuse me, just a very quick one. I was unaware actually that an independent body set the fee and so on. Could you tell me which body does set that, please?
So the process goes as this. The council has opted into something called a framework appointment by Public Sector Audit Appointments, PSAA Limited. And that essentially, they then run a contracting round and bid, for want of a better word, lots, chunks of work, and allocates that out to different firms. So the council doesn't pick its auditor, because that means that it can't pick somebody that it's potentially, I wouldn't say you do this, but potentially that you could pick somebody that's not going to give them an independent or a safe ride. So it's done by PSAA. As part of that process and the contracting round, PSAA then determine what they call it a scale fee. It's not necessarily the fee to deliver your audit. It's a calculated fee to deliver the entire contract. So there is some element of subsidy between really small organisations that would never get an auditor versus very, very large organisations that amalgamate between the two of those. And that's what they call the scale fee. For 2023-24, once they've set the scale fee, it is fixed, except for any matters that they were unaware of or specifically excluded from the scale fee because they didn't know how much it would cost.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
I suppose if I could just, in a way, summarise what Mark said. The audit market is in a bit of a state, it's fair to say. The public sector audit market is. I can't speak for the private sector. There's a lack of resource. There's all sorts of issues at different authorities. There's, I suppose, really, if you look at it from a firm perspective, i.e., the people that are going to do the audits, it's a high risk sort of market, and it's actually quite hard work auditing. It's hopefully not as bad here, but certainly at some other authorities. So there are issues in terms of, and then there's issues in terms of actually recruiting auditors and accountants as well, for users that put them in the same. So the actual market itself is struggling. So there's a degree of pressure, I guess, in terms of pay. So there's going to be a cost pressure on the audit side. And at the same time, there's all these problems with actually with certain audits. There's audits are behind in some authorities, and so what PSAA have done, in fact, they've done a procurement exercise. So the fees you're seeing for Rushcliffe, if you look at all the district councils, you will see similar increases. I'm guessing at pretty much every authority. I don't know. I'm sure Mark can speak for certainly for the ones he's aware of, but certainly the ones I know, you're seeing those increases at all those authorities. It's not. So it's not, can't really say it's a procurement issue. If we went out and did our own procurement exercise, which would have taken lots of time and money, we won't be getting any different results.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you. I have a question related to SIL in section 104 and whether you audit this specifically. At which point do we evaluate the erosion through inflation of SIL in section 104? Because obviously we can't utilise those, we can't access those funds until they're until the phases are complete. So does anybody within the council, or do you as an auditor, review the effectiveness of our SIL in section 104 funds at the end of the process, having been eroded by inflation? Having been eroded by inflation, and if there are projects earmarked, whether we need to go externally for funds to complete those projects or rein in the scale of those projects.
Okay, so I'll clarify, but when you say section 104, I think section 106. Yeah. So section 106 receipts form part of the financial statements. They will be a balance sitting in there. Our job is to look at the figures and whether they're fairly stated. I believe we did. So as part of our work, our job is to look at, is the number right? It's not our job to look at what's it being used for, that's policy. It's about, is the number right? That enables the authority to take independent assurance that the figures are right to make their decisions. So that's as far as we go. If, as part of our work, we find significant concerns, for example, perhaps timing out of those, that might be indicative of a control failure, and as a result, we might raise it at that point. But ultimately, your question is more focused around what is the governance and the controls in place over those, which is not our responsibility.
I might come back. So my question really is actually about value for money for the residents in the area, and how that value is being eroded over time through inflation, and the projects that they're expecting to come online, whether they're reined in. So I also understand that a lot of that is policy, but at some point someone must give a as a revaluation of those funds in order for the policy team to basically act on those funds or to utilise them.
Yes, I follow. Value for money is a subjective determination. It's not objective. So our opinion has to be objective. It can't be subjective, because what's value for money for one person might be somebody else. If we felt as though there was a scenario, hypothetical scenario, if we felt as though Section 106 arrangements were a substantial, in our view, significant sums at significant risk of causing significant financial loss to the authority due to a complete lapse of controls, it's something we might look at. In terms of what you're looking for at this point in time, is more it is a scrutiny that you're looking at. How well effective are these funds being used, and how are they deployed? It's not that wouldn't come through us. That's a request that would flow through, essentially through officers, of how are you assured around the effective functioning of those. We don't go looking specifically for work. It has to be, there's probably about 70,000 transactions to look at. So we have to apply a risk-based approach. So if it's an area of particular concern that could affect the authority, there's better routes through. I would suggest the route through is through understanding what it looks like in the performance management system, KPIs, or through the risk register.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you both for your presentations, which hasn't finished yet, obviously, it's carrying on. Peter mentioned it, and so did you, about our audit being, shall I call it, up to date? Best you can be, obviously, you haven't signed off yet. And also, Peter talked about other authorities being so far behind in theirs. At what point did so far behind become a real risk and challenge for those authorities distinct to this one, which is not in that, fortunately, not in that position, hopefully never will be?
So this is my best auditor answer, is it depends.
You can say that.
I think the challenge sits around, it is far too complex to sit around saying it's one fault or the other, because in each scenario it can be the presentation of poor quality financial reporting in the first instance, because we can only audit what's put in front of us. Sure. There's the complexities that sit around, shortages in the labour market from both from audit perspectives as well as finance teams. Our view is that it's absolutely imperative that we stay as close to up to date as we possibly can do, reporting on matters, whether it's through the financial statements or through our responsibilities around arrangements for financial sustainability, etc., on a timely basis. That's what we are doing here at all of our clients.
A guarded answer.
Councillor Buck.
Thank you. I don't know if this is really a question for the auditor or us or council really, because I know there's that fine line, isn't there, between the audit side and then what the council does. But looking at the significant risks list, we're referring to the local government pension scheme, which it says here it's an issue. Now, it's identified as a significant risk, and we have a planned response by critically assessing the competency, etc., as shown in the right-hand column on page 91. When it says we plan to do this, is that the authority, or is it the auditors? And just again, so does that make sense? If you see what I mean? And because it is an important aspect of the council's operation, because of the responsibility to the members of the scheme, but also because we are part of the Nottinghamshire County Council pension scheme. In all honesty, what say or input or influence does this all with Rushcliffe have in the way it goes? And is that an auditing question, or is it more of an operational question? Sorry. Wow.
Yeah, is it?
My immediate response, but I'll let the auditors answer, is it's not the royal we, it's we, as in the auditors.
I was just going to answer the same thing. I was going to say, in terms of what's in that column, that is talking about what the auditors are going to do. But of course, ultimate responsibility for the financial information is always going to be the council, not with us. But that's what our planned response will be about us. And sorry, remind me your other question about, was it the scope, how big the...
Yes, because at the end of the day, we are part of the Nottinghamshire. So what influence, if you like, do we, Rushcliffe, have on any questions there might be in that? And I'm not suggesting there are for one moment, because I know that the County Council Pension Fund is actually very, very good. But from Rushcliffe's point of view, would it have a particular say in any concerns it might have, or could it identify any concerns?
I think so. So there's two angles to your question. Okay. So my angle is coming from the figures in the financial statements. That's what we are interested in. The financial statements information will pass through the authority. For one of it, they are dependent on having actuarial reports come through. Their responsibility is to check and challenge and make sure it looks appropriate. But it requires an actuary. And as far as I'm aware, I'm not an actuary, and I don't think either of you are. So you rely on other expertise to provide that information. There's a nuance that you're asking around, possibly about where investments go in the pension fund. That's a very different question.
No, sorry, I wasn't really asking that. It was no, because I know I understand. I realise that the pension fund itself is administered and managed and monitored in its own right. But no, I was just curious. Should Rushcliffe have any query or concern about it? How does it get involved? And I assume we've got representation with the pension fund anyway. So I know we're getting a bit deep here, aren't we? But no, I think I've had the question answered. Thank you.
I was going to say that there is an annual pension fund meeting where representatives from the council do go to that, I think. So yeah. And the other thing I'd add is obviously when we set the budget, we have the pensions figures within the budget as well. So when we get the actuarial report, which is every 3 years, the triennial review every 3 years, that's when all the assumptions are revisited and the pension rates may change, and we might report that through the budget. And at that point, members obviously can, it's in that sort of forum then.
Are there any other questions or points? I'll ask a question. Probably I'll use the wrong terminology. I'm not very familiar with. On management override, I don't know if you mentioned it was statutory or it was a standard practice to deal with the risk, to assess the risk of management override. My question is, from my experience from my company in quality management system, a management override is not always though a negative thing. sometimes it can be under exceptional circumstances, it can be a good thing to override internal controls. And I just out of curiosity, when you assess the risk of management override, do you consider risky a very rigid system that doesn't take into account the context and that always prevents management overrides and give precedence to internal control, even under circumstances where management override probably is beneficial?
So I'll have a go at answering that. Hopefully I've understood it correctly. So I think your first part of your question was, do we adapt to different situations this risk? Because there are some situations where it may be, I think the word used is beneficial, but what I was sort of thinking was maybe in a smaller organisation, you might have fewer people, so there might be someone who's wearing more hats. That's kind of where I thought you might be going with the question. But I suppose it's a sort of standard name for the risk. Maybe we shouldn't worry too much about the name itself, but it really just is indication of this extra testing that we do around things like we do journal testing, for example, is a classic one, and we consider fraud risk more generally. So that's kind of what it's referring to, rather than considering a potential benefit of management override. That's kind of a bit out of the scope of it, I'd say.
No, Jenny's absolutely right. I suppose our objective with this is based on the fact that because of our independence and we are told to be skeptical, management are in a unique position that if they wanted to, they could make the figures in your financial statements whatever they wanted to be. They could manipulate the controls to produce a position that was in our terms materially so massively wrong and a false representation. So that's what we're driving at. So it's could the numbers, so not necessarily overriding control to stop somebody's fingers getting sliced off. It's more, have they changed the numbers in a way that they shouldn't have done, that does not represent the truth. So we design tests, as Jenny points out, we design tests designed to look at, could those numbers be materially inaccurate? So in those situations, because those situations are driven by usually fraudulent behaviour, there is no exception to the rule. It's done deliberately to misstate the figures. That's what we're driving at.
Okay, that's clear. Thanks.
Just to add, really, I suppose from a governance perspective, as an officer, for me, it's more about if you do. There may be occasions where actually you do need to do an override for whatever reason. I don't know. Say a bank was going under, we needed to do emergency investment or something, which is outside our normal regulations. It's more, for me, it's about if you're doing anything like that, it's transparency and accountability, and it's clear. If you do anything like that, it is reported. So I suppose what I'm saying, those sort of bigger overrides, management overrides, the good ones, I want to call them that, if they should be reported correctly.
So it is recommended that the governance scrutiny group accepts the external audit annual plan. So shall we agree to accept the plan? So that's the end, I think, of Mazer's report. You are free to leave the meeting, or you are welcome to stay as well. So we are going to move now at item 8 of the agenda, Annual Governance Statement 2023-24, presented by Peter Linfield.
Thank you both. I don't know if you're staying. You're staying. Okay. Right. So I'm just going to quickly talk about the annual governance statement. So this is for those of you that are regulars on this committee, you will have seen it before, and it's in it's fairly, I suppose, fairly prescriptive form. Some of the content will change because when we report on governance and the authority, obviously we're always in a state of flux, so things do change. So when we think about governance, we're looking at, is business conducted to excellent standards? Are we compliant with law? Is money properly safeguarded? Are we delivering value for money? It's all the sort of things that we've just been talked about from the auditors, really, in that sense.
And this report really focuses on our successes or otherwise in terms of governance and the controls and procedures we have in place. So that's what it's really just the nature of a statement at this moment in time. It's telling you where we're at in terms of governance and reporting on the various controls. It's a requirement under the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015, and when we put together like a lot of the documents you'll see, even the audit documents are all linked to audit standards. We also follow good practice and professional practices. So in terms of this, it's delivering good guidance in local government 2016, which is a Sitford and Solace publication. So when you see as you go through the report, you'll see, well, the appendix, appendix 1, you'll see, for example, at the top of page 120, there's things called principles, which says principles C and D. So we've got they're the basic principles coming out of that good guidance. So what we're trying to do is show these are the principles, and linked to those principles, these are the bits that relate to the various principles. As I said, most of the report is fairly standard. So section 2, if you look at that in particular, you've got various categories there: vision and priorities, improvement and efficiency, things like the constitution, our policies, procedures, laws and regulations, risk management. So that's another. So those who are new to the committee, you'll be seeing at the next committee, for example, there'll be an update on risk management. So and how we do on that. So there's a lot of this is pretty much the same, really. It's sort of talk about the processes and procedures that we've got at section 2, and then at section 3 is about effectiveness. How do we ensure there's effective governance? What is the framework we've got in place? Then it talks about the various mechanisms that you'll all be familiar with. The fact we've obviously got the council and what goes there, the cabinet and the cabinet's roles, the scrutiny groups, and obviously this group in particular, the role of the directors, the role of internal and external audit. So hopefully you've all, those that are new to this group would have got more of a flavour about what internal and external audits are doing. And then probably the more, if any of this document is more interesting, it's section 4. So if I was to put that as a bit of a sales pitch, but section 4 is the more interesting bit, which is really about the governance issues, and that focuses on some of the key things. It focuses on where we are with our budget position. There's something called the Sitford Financial Management Code. So we don't include this every year. We did it 2 years ago, and we've put it in again this year. Sarah will quickly comment on that. And then other things, what's happened, some of the things when I said this is a living document, and it can change as well, should add, whilst it's sort of set as it is here. If, for example, I don't know, say external audit, they'd find something that's quite significant, when we get to this document, will come again with a statement of accounts in September. And if there was any changes or anything materialised in terms of governance, then we will reflect that in terms of updating this document. So it is a sort of living document, but it focuses on things like the peer review. So it obviously references that as a particular issue in terms of and how we're going to deliver on that. And it talks about what are other small key significant risks that are going to be affecting the council. So things like simpler recycling the Environment Act in terms of bits of legislation. What's going to happen with things like potentially with the new government? What would happen with the financial settlement going forward and assumptions surrounding that? So they're big issues. And we I suppose take the external auditors' information in terms of what are the terms of their risks, some of the things we've just spoken about, and we do reference those in here as well. And then right at the end on page 130, we've got a sort of action plan in terms of some of the key issues and basically how we report on those key issues that are there that will affect the council over the next 12 months and the governance surrounding those. And then right at the end, you can see this actual document has to be signed off by the chief executive and the leader of the council. So it's they're basically saying, yeah, this annual governance statement is basically a sort of a bona fide statement and reflects the governance of Rushcliffe for 23-24. So I'll let Sarah talk about the financial management codes. That's at Appendix A. I want to say a few words about that, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks. So as Pete just mentioned, the code was introduced in 2019 and it was adopted in 2021 by most authorities. So we sort of did bring this a couple of years ago to the group as part of the annual governance statement. But this year what we've done is done sort of a peer review on our, because it's a self-assessment, so we've done a peer review with other councils so that they could sort of give a sense check against our assessment of ourselves. So again, as Pete said, it marks itself against set principles and underlying underpinning principles that we need to adhere to. So we've done that scoring and it's been peer challenged, and where recommendations were made to amend them, we have incorporated those into the code review. And as you can see from Appendix A, they are the risk weighting is shown as green for all of the points that we've assessed ourselves against. And as I say, that has been challenged by our peers.
So happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Burt.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly clear, really. I don't think there's much to say on it, really. I think it speaks for itself.
We have to
just if it's
review that.
yeah, just right.
So it is recommended that the annual governance statement, which incorporate actions for the forthcoming year 23-24, be reviewed and approved. So now we can move. So we can move now to item number 9, Capital and Investment Strategy Out-10 2023-24, presented by Sarah White.
Thank you, Chair. So the Treasury Out-10 is on page 139 of your pack. This gives a summary of the position for the year. We've reported quarterly. It comes to this group now. So most of the information in here has already been summarised to you, but this is the full year Out-10 position. So table 1 shows capital expenditure and our investments were higher than we anticipated. This is mainly due to slippage in the programme of approximately 5.7 million, in the capital programme, sorry, of 5.7 million. Table 2 at paragraph 4.4 shows that all of our capital expenditure in the year was financed, and this results in no need to externally borrow. Due to the fact that we haven't borrowed, the limits that we've set ourselves at the start of the year in the strategy for borrowing and the boundaries surrounding those have all been met. Paragraph 4.10 and table 3 shows overall the what's called the CFR, and I think we talked a bit about this at the Treasury training sessions that we had back last year. That it's the capital expenditure that's not yet been paid for, and this shows as a capital financing requirement, and we do have to pay this back. And for us this year, you can see at table 3 that this has reduced down to 9.889 million. Paragraph 4.16 and the table 4 shows the ratio of financing cost to net revenue stream. This shows as a negative number, and this is due to our investment income exceeding our MRP charge, which is the minimum revenue provision. So it's basically our repayment of unfinanced capital spend. This is higher than we originally anticipated for the previously mentioned investment income being higher due to the underspend on capital. Tables 6 and 7 show the limits for investments, and for these two tables we've not breached any of those limits during the year. And table 8 on page 145 gives you a snapshot as of the 31st of March 24 of the investments that were held at that point, around £71 million. And you can see there's a summary of the institutions that the money was held with and the interest rates that we're achieving at that point. Paragraph 4.22 shows a little bit about the income that we've received in the year. and that we started with a budget of 1.359 million. We have exceeded this at 1.887 million due to higher balances invested and the interest rate remaining slightly higher than we anticipated, with inflation not coming down as quickly as we thought. The pooled funds we've talked a little bit about at the quarterly meetings. So these are our diversified portfolios that have, they do fluctuate in relation to values of assets. So what's happened over the last, I think it was when COVID first arrived, the value of those funds did decline quite significantly, over £1 million in 1 year. So we've put a reserve to one side to cover the effect of that. And what we do is report on that each year on the value of those funds. So for this year, they have increased by 272,000, albeit they still are 0.96 million less than the original investment when they were first made. So overall for Treasury investments, inflation is not reducing as quickly as we anticipated, and this results in slightly higher interest rates. So that means they may stay higher for the coming year. There's also a lot of economic instability because of the mild recession that we went into earlier, and also the ongoing troubles in the Middle East. So that just makes for a lot of fluctuations basically in the economic environment. In terms of the non-Treasury investments at page 148 and paragraph 4.28, table 12 shows our asset investment strategy investments that were made a few years back as part of that strategy. And it also shows the returns that we've got from those investments. And as you can see from that table, the returns are quite significantly higher than the base rate and of some of our Treasury investments. So they're performing really well. Charts 2 and 3 demonstrate that we've got some diversification in our portfolio, and this basically is spreading the risk so that if there's a failure in any one area of our investment, that it wouldn't affect us significantly. There's also a risk of over-reliance on investment income on the whole against our total income. So we do set ourselves a limit. Those of you that were present for the strategy setting as part of council setting, we do set a target of 30% as being acceptable. And table 13 shows that for this year, we're at 18.5%, so that's well below. Final part of the report talks a bit about training. This is critical not just for staff who are dealing with it day to day, but also for you members of this group, because you need to give proper scrutiny as part of the TM code requires that you have appropriate knowledge and skills to do that. So we are doing an assessment at the moment, and this will be brought to the next group and any recommendations that follow that. Any questions?
Councillor Bates.
Yeah, just a very quick observation really. I thought the training last year was excellent, very, very helpful. So for the members that didn't attend, I'd really recommend it. I thought it was one of the best ones.
Yeah.
Councillor Bates. Councillor Cola.
Sorry, could you just talk through that COVID investment? What I mean, the COVID lost investment you talked about. Can you just repeat that? Because I was a bit confused.
It's paragraph 4.23.
Money was lost, obviously. I mean, investments performed less well. So you've put aside money. I don't understand how putting aside money solves that problem.
Yeah, sure. Money's not been lost. It's a paper reduction in value. So it's a little bit like your house, I suppose. It might drop in value, but you don't actually realise it until you want to sell your house. So it's the same as that. So the value of those assets has declined by, like I say, currently it's at 0.96 million, and that will only crystallise if we want to redeem those investments. So we've got a reserve to one side in case the point when we need to redeem that, the value is lower than what we paid out for it in the first place.
So in effect, you've increased the reserves to allow for the fact that the assets have reduced in value.
Correct, yeah.
And just to add, these are long-term investments, so they've gone down, and the anticipation is over time. So the £1 million, if once we've got more certainty on that, chances are we'll probably take the £1 million out, and it'll come back into the budget.
Just to add as well that those investments do provide a significant proportion of our investment income, so they do have a good return. An annual return in revenue is really good. It's just like paper capital value at the moment.
Just a query. It might be I may be missing something here, so I apologise if I am. But on paragraph 4.2, table 8, where we've got the investments in the various banks and institutions. Obviously, most of them are very high investments, but some of them are remarkably low investments, hundreds of pounds as opposed to thousands or millions. Sort of why is that? And is it really worth doing that? Because the cost of administering it, etc. I wonder whether it's worth it, really. I'm sure I've probably missed something here, and I'm sure there's a very straightforward answer which you're going to give me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think this question has actually been asked before, and because we do quite frequently have. There you go then. Those low balances.
Don't watch your recording.
The low balances are for two reasons. One of them is that in order to keep those accounts open, we have to leave balances in there. And the second reason is we have to stick to limits for how much we can invest with set institutions and, for example, banks, local authorities that come under certain groups. So some of this is where we're having to keep money elsewhere because we've reached our limit in some other groups. So there's two reasons for having those. If there were charges associated with those accounts, then we wouldn't keep small balances in there.
Councillor Regan.
Thank you. First of all, I think the finance team should be applauded for the management of the finances. I think the spread of the management is really good, especially given these times and the desire, I guess, for lots of councils to invest in high risk things. Why has Rushmore got a 1% discount on the other councils? But more seriously, the £5 million that we've lent to 5 councils here, is it 5? Isn't it? Yeah. Have we done a risk evaluation, and where do we sit in their priority should the councils collapse? Do we have priority repayments?
Okay, so to answer your first question, the interest rates that you see on there may be different because it depends on the time that the investment was made. So the Rushmore one, I can't say without checking when the investment was made, but would have been at a time before interest rates rose higher. So that's why that's at that rate. The other question about the due diligence, I think you were asking on the others, we do that. Local authorities aren't credit scored in the same way as other institutions are, so it's not as easy. But because the government essentially do protect local authorities from effectively going bankrupt, it's not a risk in the same way as it would be with another institution where there would potentially be a loss. It's deemed to be a safe investment. The main risk, I would say, is more reputational. So if we were to invest with somebody that was doing something that it came out in the news that is undesirable, that would be where the main risk is for us in investing with the local authorities. But we do that. We do we check the internet and things like that.
Councillor Bay.
Thank you. So this is going back to Councillor Gowland's point. So obviously we've got a paper loss with some of the investments, and the council's put £1 million there to mitigate that. How has that figure been reached? Is that a subjective decision that the officers have made, or have you taken external advice? Why that figure? How did you arrive at that figure?
General advice from Treasury advisors is that there ought to be a reserve to mitigate that loss. So we are following that advice anyway. But the decision to top up those reserves and create those reserves has gone to full council. I believe it was full council, and in the outturn reports where we propose to put that to put the money in there in the first place and create that reserve, that was done as part of full council decision.
just to, I think what you're asking, when we make investments, what you agree as a group is the treasury management strategy. So that gives us the parameters within which we operate. So any investments we make are within those parameters. And that, if I understand, I think that's perhaps where you were coming from. So, then
the actual £1 million figure.
Oh, the 1 million, yeah. So so then we've taken a decision through, as Sarah said, through as a part of the budgetary process to put the £1 million away. And in actual fact, if you, I don't know if you recall the last meeting when the auditors did their annual report, they sort of recognised what we've done as the right thing. So it's us being prudent to protect taxpayers from any adverse shocks.
So just because that was an officer decision to actually talk about the figure they put to the council. Is that?
But it's an office. Oh well, obviously we do the reports, but it has to be approved by cabinet or council, full council. So it's not us.
Yeah,
but we have to. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Very quick one, last one. So can I just clarify as well? You do expect those investments to become profitable again, if you like, and therefore that £1 million mitigation fund will then become available to the council to be used. That is your expectation. That £1 million will be fair game again soon.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what soon means because it's hard to say. In the current future. What goes down comes up, or goes up comes down. I suppose this is phrase, but it's difficult to say. But I'm only reticent to say. I never say never for a start, but it's difficult if you bear in mind the climate we're in with the international climate. Things can soon go off track with international events. So the expectation is that things should improve. And in fact, that 900,000, I think a few, 6 months ago was about 1.2, 1.3 million. So it's showing a sort of positive trajectory. And let's hope that should continue.
Any other questions? So it is recommended that the Governance Scrutiny Group considers and agrees the 2023-24 outcome position. So assuming we agree on that, we can move to item 10 of the agenda, work program. My understanding is to be discussed in the next meeting.
Yes, we can talk through that, yeah, sure. So the work programme for the next meeting, well, the next 3 meetings is standard items generally. So the Treasury Management training that I mentioned earlier, the matrix, will potentially move into the September meeting, which will add an item to that agenda. There's also, as Max referred to earlier, the fraud risk assessment work that BDO will be doing on that assessment and bringing that back to the September meeting as well. So there's potentially 2 items in addition on that one. For November, we're proposing to bring back a discussion about the independent member. So this was discussed a couple of years ago, which if you're new to this group, wouldn't have been part of. And we believe it should be revisited because the main aim of that independent person is to bring some challenge and another perspective into group discussions. So we're proposing to bring that also back in the November meeting. Other than that, I think most of the agenda items are standard and of a normal size to what we would normally expect.
So the statement of accounts.
The statement of accounts is currently in, sorry about that. The statement of accounts is currently in November, but as Mazars said earlier, they're proposing to finish their field work by August and issue a report, their final report in September. If it meets the timings, then it potentially would come to the September meeting to approve the statement of accounts.
Sorry, just one thing for me as well. I think at the moment it says 19th of September. I don't know if Helen's checked it or not, but I think it might be the 26th of September, not the 19th. So we'll just confirm that, but I think there was a late movement. We'll have to just check it to the council meetings report.
Yes, we will. Apologies. I mean, I've got. I've got, yeah, it's the 19th on here, so is it saying 26th on?
No, it's saying 19th, but I've got a feeling it's been moved to the 26th. You got the full council agenda. You have the meeting, the calendar of meetings.
Just bear with me a minute. I'll have to look
I was in full council. Oh, I might be wrong then.
Might move the other way then.
Is that admission to be wrong?
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's full council on the 26th of September.
Okay.
So governance must be on the 19th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair. At the bottom of page 155, it says 20th of February 2024. Should that be 25? Yeah.
I don't know who wrote this report.
So are there any other questions, contributions on the work program? Comments? Okay, so with great relief I say that I close the meeting.
Councillor Burton alluded to earlier on, where you can say thank the team over here for all the hard work, because the team will be the first to acknowledge there's a team behind the scenes as well.